Hello everyone, I'm the Scranton Strangler, and welcome back to my third installation into my video football podcast, where once a week I'll be breaking down anything that's worth talking about that's going on in the football universe. Now, I first would like to give a little welcome to any first-time viewer. Welcome, you're greatly appreciated. If you'd like to continue to be up to date and a part of the conversation regularly, then make sure to hit the follow and subscribe button. I greatly appreciate that. And then also to any returning viewers, hello again, welcome back, and your further support I greatly appreciate. And feel free to chime in at the bottom. There are with any comments, questions, topics, or if you just want to give a little shout out. So feel free to do that. Now today we're gonna kind of switch. We're gonna actually start. Let me get this podcast going for us. Now as we're switching into this podcast, what we're really going to be going over is. Starting out actually is out with the old, in with the new. And now whenever I say that, as we're heading out of the NFL draft, we're heading into training camp. So teams this week have been having their voluntary workouts, so I'm really excited about. And then we're actually going to be starting the rookie mini camp pretty soon. That's an exciting time because you get to see some of these rookies show a little flash finally, as they join their teams and just doing random drills, etc. So that's going to be pretty exciting to watch. Now a little bit later into this month, there's going to be the NFL OTAs, and then the rookie mini camps themselves, and then obviously we're going to switch over to mandatory mini camps next month on June 11th. So every team will have their mandatory mini camp, and that will just really kind of kick off the 2019-2020 season. So whenever I say out with the old, in with the new, whatever, I'm really talking about now with these young players coming in. I don't necessarily want to focus on these young players specifically, just what some of these young players and the effects have on some of the older generational players, some of the veterans, if you will. So what we're going to be starting off with is the veteran players hurt most by the draft. I've got a few guys up here that we're just going to kind of touch base on and talk about. First off is actually going to be Case Keenum, quarterback out of Washington. Switched over from Denver. He was only in Denver for 1 year after he had a fantastic season in Minnesota. And I just think he was hurt most by the draft because of Dwayne Haskins. Now, Dwayne Haskins, Washington picked up in the first round with the 15th pick this year in the draft. And I just think that that's going to be a very good fit between the two. I think that quarterback in this draft was the best fit for their scheme, their system that they have over in Washington. And so I just I don't see Case Keenum lasting very much longer if he even starts the season. It'll be very interesting to kind of watch him progress through the mini camps, preseason, things like that, to see if he even takes a snap in the regular season. I kind of expect Dwayne Haskins to take over. But again, we'll see. So his nightmare is slowly unfolding from his fluke one and done season he had a couple years ago. So that's the first player. Next player we're actually going to move into is Artie Burns. Now Artie is a cornerback. Right now he's with the Pittsburgh Steelers. In 2016 he was a first round pick, 25th overall out of Miami. Down in the Hurricanes, and he had a decent rookie year, but every year after that has just been more and more disappointing. Obviously he has Joe Hayden on the other side on the cornerback, on the defense, on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and throughout the offseason, Pittsburgh has picked up a cornerback, Steven Nelson out of Kansas City, and they also used their third-round pick on cornerback Justin Lane out of Michigan State, one of their third-round picks. So I think that's a very good fit with them too. So I don't foresee Artie Burns being a Steeler too much longer, especially since the draft. They have already gone out and said that they're not going to pick up Artie Burns' 5th-year option. So he's just been burnt one too many times. Third player on my list is going to be Shady McCoy, LaShawn McCoy. Absolutely loved him, a few years ago, but he's just had a few injury issues, obviously, and I think it's just a scheme kind of issue. They're a very run-heavy team, and he's, that elusive third down catch receiving back, that you kind of see out there. Now, he can run it. He can absolutely run it on first and second down, but he's not a north and south kind of guy. He's going to stretch the defense out and kind of catch that perimeter. So especially with him not being in his 20s anymore, that is seasoned as a NFL running back, especially. And the LaShawn McCoy, the Buffalo Bills picked up running back Devin Singletary out of FAU, so Lane Kiffin, and they really ran him. He's a workhorse there, and I think that he's going to be that primary back as the year goes on, and they're going to use Shady in those third down situations or screens, etc. So there's Shady McCoy. As much as I love him, I just think he's going to slowly start to fade out, if you will. Next on my list, I actually added him last night, but then today I might have gotten proven wrong. Kyle Rudolph is a guy, out of this whole list, Kyle Rudolph is probably my favorite. But Kyle, he's a very consistent guy. He just he had a off couple years, but he's a possession receiver. He's not going to be a guy that's going to go up and jump up for the ball, but he's got fantastic hands. And I was very much under the impression that the New England Patriots, were going to trade for him sometime this offseason, especially with the Minnesota Vikings picking up Irv Smith Jr. In the draft, tight end out of Alabama. So I just thought that they would kind of, especially with Kyle Rudolph, you could definitely get some very good trade value out of him. But maybe the Patriots, then today they picked up Ben Watson. Sorry, I got a text. Anyway, so they picked up Ben Watson, so I obviously don't see them going out and picking up Kyle Rudolph anymore. But Kyle, he's a guy that's I think his time in Minnesota possibly has run out. Could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Like I said, he's probably my favorite on the list, but he needs to go to a team where he's going to get a little bit more action, because he's definitely a top tight end in my opinion. Last but not least on this list is going to be Joe Flacco. It seems like only a couple years ago the big question was he an elite quarterback? Well, no, he's not. He wasn't then, and he's not now. He's a good Brit. He was with Baltimore since 2008, I believe, is whenever he was drafted, and he got him one Super Bowl. So that's what I expect out of him. That's all I really think that they're going to get out of him. He's going to do decent. He was overthrown by a rookie in Baltimore, and I think eventually he's going to be overthrown by the new rookie in Denver. John Elway picked him up obviously from Baltimore, moved him, and he's just a guy to bridge the gap. I think Drew Lock is going to be the guy. I think they did a really good job picking him up in the draft. So I think he is going to be the guy in Denver. I just think he needs a little grooming time, and Joe Flacco is a guy that can definitely do that. So those are my 5 guys. The veterans hurt most. The 5 veterans hurt most by the draft. Obviously, there were more, but those were the ones that stood out in my opinion. Okay, so we're going to move on real quick. Now we're going to switch gears, actually, because a lot of these podcasts that I've been doing for the past couple weeks have been about the professional football, NFL. Now we're going to switch gears to college, the NCAA. Recently, over the offseason, they've made a few rule changes. It's not the most fun thing to talk about, but it is something that everybody should know. And if you don't, I would definitely like to make you aware, just so you're not watching a game sometime and something happens and you weren't sure what it was. So we're going to switch it over to the NCAA rule changes. Now, a couple of, there's actually 4 of them. So I've got them displayed up there that you can definitely look at, and I'll go one by one and kind of explain them. Overtime was a big one. 2 out of 4 of them were in the overtime segment. So this change, what happens is what they're trying to do is shorten down overtime. They're trying to protect players. They made it very clear this offseason that was their goal, was to protect big hits, blindside blocks, and then also kind of shorten down longer games, things that go into overtime, fatigue, things like that. So one of the first rule that we're going to talk about is the shortened sessions. Now, a session in college football overtime, obviously, if you're not aware, in overtime, each team does possess the ball at least once. You go onto the opponent's 25-yard line, and each team gets a possession to score, not score, kick a field goal, whatever the case may be. And then if you're the first team that goes, the second team will obviously get a chance after that to tie, beat, or not. So that is a session in college football overtime. That's what I'm referring to. Now, after these changes, after the 4th session, so starting in the 5th and on, they're not going to be doing putting you on the 25-yard line like it has been in the past. So once you hit in that 5th overtime, actually what they did is they're just going to line you up on the 3-yard line and run 2-point conversions. So it kind of shortened down the longer drives. Texas A&M, this was because of you. I believe there was a 7th overtime in that game, which was just crazy. So it was a fun game, though. I have no complaints. But like I said, they wanted to shorten down these games to protect the players is really what I've gathered from. So they shortened down after the 4th session. From 5th on, they're just going to line you up on the 3-yard line, and each team is going to get a shot to run 2-point conversions. Now, speaking of overtime sessions, the second rule that they actually changed was they're implementing a 2-minute rest period after a second session of overtime and a 4th session in overtime. Now, these rules, they're really not going to affect us too much. There's rarely an occasion where a game goes into overtime, let alone goes into the 4th period or the 7th period like we saw last year. So it's not really going to affect us, but again, I just wanted to make you aware. So now we're going to move on to the 3rd one, which is targeting. Now, targeting previously, whenever you target a player, they're going to flag you for it. You're going to get a 15-yard penalty, and then they're going to review that hit to deem it targeting or not. If you hit a defenseless player, helmet to helmet, all those things, they're going to consider to see if you miss the next half of a game. So if the hit occurred at the beginning of the game before halftime, then you're going to miss that second half. And then if the hit obviously happened in the second half of a game, the very, very next game that happens, you are suspended that first half. So that was the previous rule. Now they've upped the ante. So if you get hit with targeting, then you're going to get hit with a full 1-game suspension. So again, trying to protect these players, trying to prevent some of those late hits, some of those targeting hits, some of those blindside blocks, which we're going to segue into the next and last rule. It wasn't a change, it was just more expanded on. The blindside blocking was limited to the neck and head area. If you blindside block them, you get a 15-yard penalty. Really what this did was it just expanded the hitbox. So you don't have to hit them in the head or neck area to warrant a penalty. If you blindside block a player anywhere on their body, it is going to be a 15-yard penalty. So again, 4th time in a row that it's a rule that's really just for the better, for the health for the players. Because we all love the game. We don't want to see anybody get hurt because it can make or break a season for a team. So those are the 4 rule changes / expansions that the NCAA came up with over the off season, or this current off season. So I wanted to make y'all aware of it. Now we're going to segue into a little bit more of a fun conversation. It's pretty much the talk of the week, the recruit of the week, DJ. I'll go ahead and switch it over there. DJ, the top recruit in the nation for the class of 2020, 5-star recruit, has committed to the University of Clemson. They had it narrowed down to the last two, which was Clemson and Oregon. But then I believe it was 2 days ago, finally committed officially, and he will be going to the University of Clemson. So the rich get richer. Obviously, the Clemson have definitely had a true luck the past few years, or really just the past, say decade or so, with fantastic quarterbacks. Guy's an absolute monster. If you get a second, definitely look him up. Look up his high school tape. And St. John Bosco, I believe it was, out of, I think it's like California, or not too sure exactly what state it's in, but just an absolute monster. The guy reminds me of Cam Newton. He's a 6'4", 240-pound guy. He just doesn't actually have the flatline, maybe speed that Cam Newton does. This guy's, he's not as fast as you would think he is, but he absolutely has fantastic ability to kind of move around and shuffle in the pocket. But he can definitely take off if you don't account for his legs. So let's see. Yeah, 6'4", but so the quarterback coach for Clemson, Brandon Streeter, I think it's going to be a good fit. The guy's had some incredible quarterbacks in the past, from Taj Boyd to Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence now, and then obviously DJ. So he looks to kind of take the reins next year in 2020, because right now I'm sure Trevor Locke is a shoo-in to be drafted next year and to enter into the NFL draft. So good luck to this young man. I can't wait to see him on the collegiate level. So next, what we're going to do, speaking of quarterbacks, now we all know the A-plus quarterbacks in this league. We know the speaking of Trevor Lawrence's, we know the Tua Tagovailoa's, we know the Jalen Hurts's of college football. So obviously they're great players, but what I want to do is kind of look a little bit further past those guys. I want to kind of point out some guys that are a little under some people's radar. Some of them aren't, but some of them are, and I just want these guys to get the recognition that they deserve, because they're definitely top quarterbacks. They're just, it's kind of hard to be on that level, especially with the prestigious schools that these guys are going to, and the offensive coordinators, coaching staff that these guys are provided with. So first on that list, on my watch list for this next season, is going to be Ian Book, quarterback for Notre Dame. He's just a very very solid guy. He actually didn't even start all of last year. I know he came in a little bit late to the season, but had a great year. Led him to the college football playoffs. Unfortunately, they did come a lot short in that game, but wasn't for lack of him trying. Clemson would have beaten anybody last year, I think. So Ian Book, he's a very accurate guy. He had incredible completion percentage. It was, I believe, at one point, if it didn't finish in the top, it was, I know for sure, the number one completion percentage in college football. I think his yard per throw, average yard per attempt and all that can get a little bit bigger. But then again, the number one thing, the biggest Notre Dame's biggest success comes from the running game. So it's kind of hard, obviously a non-mobile quarterback to thrive in a system like that. But I look to him to have another big year next year. I know they lost a big target in wide receiver and their running back, but that's whenever the quarterbacks usually step up and have a pretty stellar year. So Ian Book, keep your eyes on him. Because I know they are locked and loaded for next year as well. Next guy on my list is probably a guy that not a lot of people know about. Is going to be Mason Fine, quarterback from the University of North Texas, out of the Conference USA. Guy is just a very true gunslinger. He may be a little undersized, not too much nowadays, because quarterbacks are not as big as they used to be. But he's a 5'10.5", 5'11" guy, and can just throw the ball. He's in an air raid system. Of course, his coach is Graham Harrell. If anyone knows him, he used to be the quarterback at Texas Tech, which is he was birthed from an air raid system and Mike Leach. So Mason Fine, I just love the guy. Let's see. Yeah, that's all I have really written on him. Please, if you actually have a couple seconds, look at this guy's tape. Again, he's not the biggest guy, but he's got a pretty strong arm. He's very accurate, and he's in a system where he can absolutely thrive, and he's got the weapons to do it. So University of North Texas looks to win Conference USA this year. I believe UAB, University of Alabama Birmingham, won it last year, so they're gonna look to kind of top them. Third guy on my list actually is a guy that most people talk about. I think a couple people are pretty high on this guy. In my opinion, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves, and I think that he deserves to be talked about a little bit. Is Jake Fromm, quarterback out of Georgia. Guy is probably one of my, if not my favorite, he's definitely top 3 favorite quarterbacks for me this year. Guys, this is going to be his best year, and that's one of the points that I wanted to bring up. One of the biggest things that comes up to me that catches my eye about him is if you watch his game and watch his stats, the guy had an unbelievable freshman year, especially against those defenses in the SEC, and he had a great year as a freshman. But one of those things that stood out to me was Jake Fromm increased and got better in every single aspect of his game last year. And I actually have that. Let me pull that up for you guys. There we are. So 2017 to 2018, you can see in literally every category the guy gets better. From pass completion percentages, he jumps 5%. 5% in 1 year as a quarterback is pretty impressive. So it's not like they switched a whole lot up. I do think it has something to do with obviously Georgia. That his freshman year he had 2 A+ running backs at his stable, so he probably didn't. The attempts wise, he threw a little bit more that second year, so probably opened it up a little bit more for him. But going down the list, his completion percentage, he upped it over 5%. His yardage, he threw for more yards. He threw for 6 more touchdowns. He threw less interceptions. And his passer rating jumped by 11 points. So the Jake Fromm, absolute baller, and I think he's just an underrated quarterback. Another thing that I wanted to bring up with him was, like I said earlier, he's playing at a very high level in a very high-leveled conference. He's playing in the Southern East Conference, the SEC, which is the best conference in college football, and he's playing some of the best defenses. Let me see. Bring this up real quick. I've got Alabama and the University of Florida, 2 top 25 teams, 2 top 25 defenses, and you can see his stats are just unbeatable. And another thing I wanted to add about his stats, I wish I had it highlighted. I don't think I can do that right now, but some of those things right there are season highs for him and season lows for him. The Alabama yardage, he threw for over 300 yards. Well, that was the best he did all year. His 3 touchdowns in a game, that was one of the best he did all year, and he did it to both of the defenses. He threw 0 interceptions against some of the best defenses. His rating against them is phenomenal. His QBR is 94, 96. So he's not just doing it against the powder puff teams. And I think whenever sometimes people think about the SEC teams, they think about all the BS teams that they play. Well, not in this particular case. I wanted to kind of point out the 2 best teams that he played, and that he played some of his best ball against those 2 teams. So everybody just keep an eye on Jake Fromm. I have him going pretty high next year in the NFL draft. Obviously way too early to tell, but look to them to possibly make a run at that SEC championship win this year, because he was this close to winning it last year. Just Jalen Hurts stepped in. Now a guy that this is actually an honorable mention, because I'm just very excited to see this guy. Hasn't taken a college football snap really. So is Justin Fields. Now he's a 5-star recruit. He was actually at Georgia and then didn't win the starting job over Jake Fromm, which is another testament to Jake Fromm and just the high level that he's playing at. So Justin Fields transfers over to Ohio State. and one of the most prestigious schools, especially for quarterbacks in the nation, right there, the Buckeyes, who are in desperate need. He transferred over, won the starting job from a Tate Martell, who's no longer there. So just a very competitive guy and a very skilled guy that's just been patiently waiting his turn. And I think that this year is going to be a year to remember for him. Let me read a couple names to you guys real quick. Troy Smith, Terrell Pryor, Braxton Miller, Cardale Jones, J.T. Barrett, and Dwayne Haskins. Over the past 12 years, those have been the quarterbacks at Ohio State. And I bring that up because Ohio State knows how to coach that position. They know how to play ball. And every single one of those guys that I mentioned had fantastic collegiate careers, at least. Can't say that too much for the NFL level, but sometimes that happens. So as far as college goes, these guys were absolutely production monsters. And I think that's another testament that why I'm so excited for Justin Fields to finally get in that role where he's going to make a dominant run at the Big Ten, as Ohio State has really done the past, decade, if you will. So that was my honorable mention, and then we'll move on. Going to switch over into my last segment, ESPN. I believe it was this week. It may have been last week. I'm kind of blurring together lately, but over the last week or two, ESPN released their post-spring top 25 rankings. So I wanted to put those up there, and then I wanted to show you mine, because why not, right? I think that for the most part, obviously Clemson's the number one team in college football, and Alabama's number two. I don't think anybody really has too much argument there. But other than that, I think they did a pretty good job. I just had a couple different opinions on a couple teams slid in my opinion, and I think that ESPN takes an account into some teams' bowl games that they do the previous year, and a couple of the teams there I think lost or got beat really bad, dominated, was just for lack of effort, lack of trying. So now they should be penalized for that in my eyes, but I'm just going to go with just who I think is the best versus who deserves to be there. So ESPN's right there. We're going to go over that. Obviously, we have Clemson and Alabama. No argument there. We have Georgia. Rounded in third. Georgia is going to make a pretty decent run, and I'm not going to be surprised if they beat Alabama this year. So, and then you have Oklahoma, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Florida, LSU, and then Oregon to round out the top 10. I've got the last 15 there if you want to kind of go over. Again, this is just ESPN's top 25 rankings. So on this other side, I'm going to actually put up my top 25. If you mind doing that for me. There we go. All right, so that's the Scranton Stranglers top 25 post-spring. I know, don't roast me too much on it. I know, I'll have a pushback on a couple teams from a couple different individuals. But let me just go down the list kind of briefly. Clemson and Alabama. It's probably my third time to say it. You have no argument from me there. Clemson is the best team in America, and I think they're going to be definitely the new dynasty to beat. Alabama, absolute powerhouse. Of course, they have the best coach in the NCAA, but have them at number 2. Georgia, Oklahoma, Georgia and Oklahoma, pretty up there. But Oklahoma, they have to address some of the issues on the other side of the ball, or there's just really no point in playing in those games and getting up 28-0 in the first quarter. Ohio State, super excited for them. Now, really where I'm going to get some pushback is going to be the Michigan, Florida, LSU, Notre Dame. Those 4 teams right there, you could put them in pretty much different orders, and you could get an argument from, I could argue for each team to go at number 6. But I put Michigan, they have they have the coach, they have the players, and they've been playing defense at the highest level for a couple years now. Now they did lose, just at the top of my head, 3 starters. They've got the Devin Bush, Chase Winovich, and Chris Long, cornerback, that they lost. I'm pretty sure there's a little bit more that got drafted, but those are just at least the 3 starters that are popping in my head right now. So they definitely have some holes, but they recruit very well on defense, and I know that they already got a guy, at least at cornerback, 5-star guy that's had a hell of a spring that I've read about and watched a little bit on tape. Spring ball had a picks. So pretty excited about him. But I've got Michigan and then Florida. I know Florida thumped them real good in that bowl game last season. But Michigan's one of those teams where I just think that they gave up. I don't know what and that really upsets me because I'm not a fan of, giving up or, sitting your bowl game out, things like that. I'm not a fan of that personally. So I've got, and it's a shame that I rewarded it, but I just think that Michigan, if they played them again, that Michigan would win. So LSU got down there, and then Notre Dame, Texas, got the Texas brothers, the Texas and Texas A&M. They're really cousins, but now they're separated. And then obviously you can see those Oregon, Penn State, Washington, UCF, Nebraska, Utah, Stanford, Washington State, Auburn, Wisconsin, Army, Syracuse, Boise State, and then Mississippi State. So that's my top 25, ESPN and Scranton Stranglers. I hope y'all enjoyed the show. Again, I really appreciate y'all. Feel free to follow and or subscribe at the top. This is going to end my weekly podcast. And if you have any comments, questions, or if you want to talk about a specific topic next week, please feel free to leave that in the comments so I can add that to my list. So, again, Scranton Strangler out, and God bless. Love you all. Have a good night.